Okay, welcome back to Roll Mangging for our Call of Cthulhu campaign. And it was a foggy day in London town this time. Yes, they finally get into London proper, and events are set into motion. It's all kind of very exciting. It was a fun session. Cool stuff. They're just getting to the tip of the iceberg, though, of what London has to offer. Alright, so Olaf could not make this session, so there was no Ulysses. He basically just hung out at Alfred's place, reading the entire time. So, yeah, that's about it. Reginald decided to go into town. He decided to go into London. Charlie went with him. Alfred stayed behind for another day, and Mafume, of course, was still at the Southampton Customs lockup or whatever. And so Reginald goes to Steinway Hall. He's got some business that he needs to attend to, so he goes to his offices there. Charlie, instead, goes to the Scoop, the offices of the Scoop, which Jonah told him about. So that's the tabloid run by Mickey Mahoney, who may or may not have met with Jackson when he was in London. And so that's basically all we saw of Reginald for the next couple days. He was just doing work, so that's it. So Charlie goes into the Scoop, and he meets with Mickey. And Mickey was very sad to hear about Jackson's death. You know, that's a big blow. Jackson was a good guy, good journalist, good, investigative guy. And so Charlie told him that, he was part of this team kind of investigating his death and retracing his steps and going through stuff like that. And he asked about if Jackson had talked to him when he was here. And Mickey said, yeah, he had spoken with me. He was kind of rattled, he was very frantic, but he promised me the story about this cult, this evil cult operating in London, this well-connected cult. And he promised me all these details, this juicy story, but he skipped town before he gave it to me. So he couldn't get me anything about it. So I want that story. It sounds awesome, but now he's dead. And so, of course, Charlie he's gonna follow up on the story. He's gonna find out about it. He's gonna get the details to Mickey. So that's really excites Mickey Mahoney. This is what he's all about. That's cash money, And so Mickey said that while he was here at the Scoop, he had checked in about 3 different stories, 3 different Scoop articles. He had looked at 3 of them. And so he doesn't know why he was interested in these 3, and he doesn't know if he followed up on any of them, but he still has them, he remembers which 3 he looked at. And so he gets the 3 articles and hands them to Charlie Chalk. And so Charlie, Mickey gives him the number at the Scoop, and he says, any information, you get, I will pay for. This is what is my livelihood, and any information you need, any help I can be, I'll do whatever. I know the town, I know its people, so, I can help you out. And because he wants to, Jackson was a good guy, so he wants, if these people are going to both look into his death and find some juicy stories, Mickey's all on board for that. And so Charlie thanks him and leaves. And before Charlie leaves, he tells Mickey about his... No, that's later. No, okay, never mind. So Charlie is like, alright, I'm going to head back to Alfred's place, which is like a 2-hour drive. And so he heads back, and on the way he reads the 3 articles. The first one talks about a local artist who has been making these kind of very abstract, disturbing works of art that are kind of just captivating the art world with what he's drawing here. And he claims that he has visions of other dimensions, and all he's doing is just bringing these to canvas, And so this definitely sparked Charlie's interest because other dimensions in a Call of Cthulhu game, yeah. Now, it is important to remember that these are tabloids, but I'm pretty sure that all 3 articles Charlie was reading is absolute fact because it's Call of Cthulhu. And so, a normal person in this world reading these tabloids is just like, yeah, okay, crazy Archer, other dimensions. And so, okay, local artists, all right. The second one was about a monster on the loose in this local, rural village. And it had slaughtered a couple people and almost slaughtered a third. And the constables claimed that he shot it, but perhaps it's still out there, And so that was in Lesser Edale, over in Derbyshire. And the third story was about murders in London of foreigners. Now, the article said unidentified foreigner. If Charlie had gone back and asked Mickey, do you have any more details about the foreigner, he would have, but that never came to light. So I'm not going to reveal it here because it's still ongoing. Which I guess that was kind of a... You know what? I don't care. They can call up Mickey and ask him. I just gave them the idea. Go ahead. Do it. And so, basically, these foreigners were being beaten half to death and then stabbed through the heart. Every single one. And the article, at the writing of the article, there had been 24 of them over the last 3 years. And so Inspector James Barrington's name was mentioned in the article as being kind of involved with the case and stuff. So those were the 3. So Charlie gets back to the Alfred's place, tells the others about these stories. Jackson was looking into them, and these are 3 leads we got. And then he calls up Mickey from there, and he tells him about Mafume. Our good buddy Mafume, part of our team, has had some trouble with customs over in Southampton. And can you maybe make a few calls? Can you help out? And of course, Mickey was like, I'll do the best I can. And so, of course, Mickey was able to free him. He calls him back. He's like, yeah, apparently I had some dirt on some guys over there in Southampton, and so I was able to get him out. He'll be free tomorrow morning, but I think he's still probably going to have a lot of trouble getting a passport, so I don't know how it's going to be leaving London. But they were happy. And so then we introduced Ed's new character, Von Lyons. Yes, his first name is Von. I don't know. Not that I've ever heard of, but sure. Whatever. Von Lyons. And, like, if it was Jeremy Von Lyons. Okay, Von is like a little bridge, right? Isn't it? It doesn't matter. That's his name. And so I guess his character and Alfred had been kind of corresponding. I don't know how the two know each other, but they do. And they kept this all very hidden. I didn't really know much. The thing I know about his character is I think it was his wife and child. Yeah, his wife and child were murdered by cultists, apparently. What cultists? For what reason? I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. But they were, and so now he hates everything regarding cults. Okay. And so if he finds anything occult, it's his job to lock it away and keep it from, spreading out there amongst the world. So he's an occult hunter, sure. And so I guess in their spare time, Von Lyons had put together a safe house. This very secure place in the heart of London. And this is really something you have to tell your DM. I mean, I know you love to keep secrets, but you have to tell your DM. You can't just pull shit out like that. I'm sorry. I allowed it because it's not a big deal. But imagine if you had switched safe house with tank. And then you were all of a sudden like, oh, well, while this was going on, I procured this tank. And so I have that now. I know I didn't tell you about it, but we have a tank. And you can't do that, all right? Now, sure, a safe house is not the same thing as a tank, but you have to tell your DM most things. That's just how it is. Like, I don't know what you thought I was going to do with this information about the safe house. Like, I was going to sabotage it or something. Because I can easily do that during the game. Telling me stuff prevents something from happening being like, oh, well, I have this I didn't tell you about. No, you don't. Because I can say that. I could have easily whisked away your little safe house if I really felt like it. That may be an asshole thing for me to do, but I can do it. And, you know, if you keep hiding stuff from me, I'm more inclined to do it. So, yeah, that's just a little tip. Don't hide things from your DM, because it won't work out for you. It's not worth it. Okay, so he joined the group. He's like, yeah, this is Von Lyons. I know him. He's got a safe house. He likes hunting cult things. Okay. And so that was pretty much it for the 4th. They all pretty much waited at Alfred's place, except for Reginald, who was at the Steinway Hall, and he was reading the narcotic manuscripts. Alright. February 5th, 1925, which was Thursday. They send the butler to pick up Mafume, so he rejoins the group. And Charlie gives him Africa's Dark Sex, the book. And so Mafume is going to start reading that. And so that day was pretty much chill at Alfred's day. For whatever, they just kind of hung out. They didn't do much because Reginald was still working and they wanted to all be as a group. So they were going to wait till Friday to hook up with Reginald to start the investigation. So February 6, 1925, Friday. They all go into London to meet Reginald at the Steinway Hall. And so they discuss, they go into his offices, and they discuss these 3 leads and the other leads, and what do we do? What's our first course of action? And so they basically have, I would say 4 leads, because one of them is kind of 2 in 1. The first lead is the artist. The second lead is the monster slaughtering thing out in the village. The third is the mysterious murders of foreigners. And that's also that's linked with James Barrington, who Jonah told them about. So that's kind of the same thing. And then the final is the Penhew Foundation, which they know one of the principal members of the Carlisle expedition was Sir Aubrey Penhew. He runs this foundation. It's very, Egyptian in knowledge, and what they all do is very Egyptian. And so there could be some info there. Because the expedition definitely did go into Egypt. They went to Cairo, so there could be a lead there. All right, so they discuss all these. Reginald definitely shows an interest in speaking to somebody at the Penhew Foundation, who's ever high up over there. But Reginald also shows a great interest in this artist thing. Because of the 3 leads, the articles, the artist is both local, it's not very nebulous, like there's an artist, here's an address, we can go see the artist. And it's also very, not intrinsically dangerous. The other ones involve slaughtering and murders. This is just art. So eventually they all decide, all right, let's go do this artist thing, but we don't want to send too many people. We don't want to spook them. So Reginald is definitely going to go, because there's, people talk about purchasing these paintings, and so he's got the money to purchase a painting. So he's going to go. Charlie decides to go. And then Mafume, they talk Mafume into going because maybe they want to take pictures of the art, just in case. And then Alfred and Von Lyons are just going to kind of hang out and perhaps plan a trip out to Lesser Adale for the second article. So that was all the plan. And so as they're all heading outside of the building, they hear a voice coming from a nearby alley, which is just psst, psst. And so they turn and they see like a little hand and like some hair puffing out, but they don't see a face. He's hiding himself. And so of course they all go over there because you can't ignore that. And they turn the corner and they see a short, little, fat, hairy man. And he's like, hey, Jonah sent me. My name's Gulk. And yeah, the group was just like, oh, wah! Because at some point I had said the bag was not going to be involved in this campaign. And I meant it. I didn't say Golk wasn't in the campaign, but I said the bag wasn't. And so, what's Golk without the bag? I know, but here he is. And so, of course, they're all very mistrustful because it's Golk. So they're kind of metagaming. But they're a little not metagaming because Jonah didn't mention sending anybody. And so they start talking to him. And they're like, well, why did Jonah send? Like, what can you offer to help us? And he's like, well, I know a little about a lot of things, you know. And so Alfred goes in. He goes into the office. He's going to make a phone call to Jonah, which takes about an hour to connect, you know, across the sea at this point. And so the others, they were about to head over to the artist, but now they're like, we got to deal with this first. So they all go back inside. They go to the cafeteria, and he eats a bunch of food, and they start asking him questions. They're like, what do you do for a profession, Golk? Well, I guess I would say I'm like an adventurer. You know, I explore the world in search of greater excitement. Like, And what other questions did they ask him? They were like, you said you know things. Well, tell us something you know. You know, about where you've been and stuff. I was like, well, I was in. Jonah said you were looking after the Carlisle expedition. I was in Africa when they were lost. That was a crazy time. They're like, oh, how convenient, you know. They're very suspicious of Golk. And so, somebody asked, what languages do you speak? I think Charlie asked him, what languages do you speak? Like, oh, I speak a few. Do you speak French? Like, yeah, I speak French. Like, what about African? African. He's like, yeah, I speak Swahili and Kikuyu, and you know, I speak some of that. I think somebody asked him about hieroglyphics. Yeah, it's been a while, but I could probably read some hieroglyphics. And they're like, oh man, this guy just has all the answers to all our problems. Because languages is one of their problems. Sure enough. And so, I don't think they were pestering him that much after that. And so, Alfred finally connects with Jonah. And he's like, did you send somebody to help us? There's a guy here named Golk who says that you sent him. And Jonah's like, no, I didn't send anybody. That sounds worrying. I've never heard of this Golk character. And so I could just picture it in like a horror movie where it just zooms in on Alfred on the phone, just boom. And so, you know, the conversation went on about how that's probably not good. You know, there's eyes and ears everywhere. You need to check this guy out and get back to me and blah, blah, blah. And so, we later retconned that he kept Jonah on hold so he didn't have to reconnect in an hour. And he was going to go, like, discuss this with the group and then get back to him. And so he went back into the cafeteria. And, he was like, he was very, you know, he didn't make a big scene of it when he first came in. He was like, oh, how's our buddy Golk here doing? And they were like, oh, well, he's like the answer to all our problems. He speaks he speaks Swahili. And so Alfred, who speaks Swahili, is like, oh, he does, huh? And so in Swahili, he says, where did you learn to speak Swahili? And so Golk responds in completely flawless Swahili from a local tribe or whatever. He's like, I know I'll talk about this so much in Secrets of Roaming. I don't want to say anything here, but the idea is to just completely mindfuck him, and I think that's what I was kind of doing. And so he eventually was like, well, I spoke to Jonah, and he says he didn't send anybody. In fact, he said he's never heard of a Gulk. And I think at this point, Ed Von Lyons pulled out his revolver right in the cafeteria and pointed at him, at Gulk. He's like, what? He doesn't remember? Oh, he must be getting old. And so nobody's trusting him at this point. I'm just curious as to what's going on in their heads, because they can't metagame really. But I'm interested in both their characters' perspectives and the player perspectives, because they know Gulk. They know he's a troublemaker, he has the bag, and he makes a lot of fuss. But this is a very kind of different form of Gulk. We've never really seen Gulk as particularly knowledgeable. And I think that scares the hell out of them. And so Alfred like diffused the situation from the gun because Ed was about to shoot him, I think. So he calmed that down. He's like, "Well, I have Jonah on the phone, so why don't you talk to him and clear this all up?" And so he's like, "Sure, that's fine. I'm making a big deal out of this, but that's okay." And so he goes in there. There's no speakerphone. So he grabs him. He's like, "Jonah, it's Gulk. You don't remember me?" Uh-huh. Okay. And so, they all of them tried to, like, listen in. Like, they're all in the room and they're all just, like, trying to hear the other end of this phone call. And the only one that succeeded was Charlie. And so I'm like, okay, Charlie, you don't hear anything coming from the other end. It's just like, what? And so Gulk says, uh-huh. And so Charlie grabs the phone from him. He's like, hello? And he hears Jonah be like, hello? I was speaking to Gulk. He's like, oh, sorry. And he gives the phone back, and he's just like, what? And so Gulk's just like, how rude! And he continues his little conversation. And, eventually he's like, alright, so you just tell them all about me, Jonah, and we can clear this up. And he hands the phone off. And then the phone goes all the way around. And so this completely unsettled them, as they spoke to Jonah afterwards. And he's basically just like, yes, Gulk is completely on the level. He is a good guy. I sent him to you to help out. He basically was like that to all of them. And I was like, yeah, you can tell he doesn't sound like the normal Jonah. And it's like everyone who's just, Gulk is completely on the level. And so they knew, like, this was not right. But they didn't really press it. They were just like, okay. And so they hung up the phone. And now they're like, man, it's if it was anybody but Gulk, I feel like they already would have shot him. So I feel like that's metagaming, kind of. But the fact that it's Gulk, and he's normally so lovable, I guess, in some people's eyes, is making them very just, I can't wait to talk about it in Secrets of Roaming. Yeah. So they're like, all right, let's hold on here. Let's go see this artist. And Gulk's like, I'll come with. And so a couple of them were not really for this idea. And then the others were like, we don't want to, we already discussed we didn't want to spook this guy. We didn't want to bring too many people. So we'll bring you along in the vehicle, but, we're going to go in just a couple of us, and then if it's okay, we'll bring you in later. And he's like, okay. And so they drive over there. And as they leave, Alfred and Von Lyons speak to each other, and they're just like, I don't trust him. He's bad news. But it's Gulk. And so they go to the artist. And so it's just Reginald and Charlie that go up and knock on the door. And they're greeted by an older woman, probably about 70 years old. And she's carrying like a knitting basket. And she's like, "Oh, hello." And they mention the paintings in the article. And she's like, "Oh, you're here to buy paintings." And they show her some money. And she takes them in. They go upstairs to the garret. And there's a bunch of paintings hanging in there. There's like kerosene lamps that light the place. It's very dimly lit. And there's a skylight up above, but it's like been painted black to blot out all the light. There's like a padlocked closet on one of the walls. And then in the center there's just an easel and a young guy painting there. And so they started speaking to Miles. And I told them, like, just flat out, you can tell this guy's insane. Like, he's trembling the whole time, and as he's speaking, he's just like, "Yes, the paintings are glorious, aren't they?" Like, I wasn't being coy about it. You can tell this guy's insane. And so they're like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Yes, look at the paintings, go ahead." And so there's 21 paintings on the wall, quite a few. And so they start going across the first row, and I describe each one of them to them. And after the fifth one, they stop. And actually, I think that's where we broke for dinner. So they went through the first 6. And after they look at the first 6, they kind of step away to evaluate it. And I'm like, "Okay, roll 6 sanity rolls." And they thought I was joking. I was not joking. They rolled 6 sanity rolls. And so it wasn't a massive loss of sanity. And like 3 and 4 or something like that. And so Reginald took an interest in a couple of the paintings that he thought looked cool. And so he mentioned, like, he purchases a couple of the paintings, he gives the money, he's like, "Oh, package those up." And then he speaks to Miles and he's like, "I have a friend who's a photographer. I was wondering if I could bring him in and have him take some pictures of the art to kind of bring some more publicity." And normally, in my head, I probably wouldn't allow that, but I guess as part of the article that they read from the scoop, there was a picture of one of the paintings. And so I was like, okay, I guess Miles already allowed that. So he's like, "Yes, sure, more publicity for the glorious paintings." And so they went out, they got Gulk and Mafume. They come in. And like, "Mafume, take pictures of everything." And so Mafume is about to look at every single one of them after they know that these cause some sanity loss. And so he couldn't really metagame it. He was like, "All right." And so Gulk and him went and looked at all 21 paintings. And Mafume had to make 21 sanity checks. It was very exciting. I just love saying make 21 sanity checks. And so he lost 14 sanity, I think. But it wasn't like one big sum. It was like, I think it was like 6 D3 losses, like individual ones. So it's not like, boom, temporary insane, you know. And Gulk's just like, "Man, those are cool." And so a couple paintings, most of them were very just kind of grotesque and strange and eerie, but a couple of them were notable. One was a picture of, like, it was like a painting of somebody looking in through a window, and through the window, working at their desk, was Reginald Steinway, which is very strange. Another one that was notable was of a great mountain, and there was like a giant looming figure over it with a long red tendril coming out of it, like almost like a silhouette of it or something. And surrounding the mountain were hundreds of tiny little humanoid figures, like worshiping the mountain, and each one of them had a little headdress on it that Mafume recognized as the headdress of the Bloody Tongue. What? Can they put the pieces together? And so Mafume got pictures of everything, and after he was done, he just walked out. He was like, "Okay." So he didn't say anything, he just walked out. And so Oh! I almost forgot something. Yes. Yes. Okay. As Reginald went outside to get Mifune and Gulk, Charlie stayed there in the room with Miles. And so he starts talking to Miles about these paintings. And Miles is like, do you want to see my masterpiece? And so, of course, everybody knew that, no, you don't want to see his masterpiece. But that's the beauty of Call of Cthulhu, is you want to see the masterpiece. So he's like, yes, show me the masterpiece. And so he goes over to the closet, he unlocks the padlock, he opens it up, and there's a painting covered by a sheet. He's like, are you ready to see the masterpiece? He's like, yeah, show me that thing. So he rips off the sheet, and there's a painting. And it's of almost like a prehistoric age, like the dinosaur age. And there's like a swampy area, and there's like a little island with a stone altar. And as Charlie is looking at this painting, like, the colors start to like swirl almost, and the water starts to ripple and kind of move three-dimensionally. And so he continues to look at it, and I failed a roll, and so I'm like, okay, you feel like you were almost tempted to step into the painting, but you resisted it. And so Miles is... I wonder if that's going to focus now. Oh, God. Well, nobody watches the video anyways, right? I'm sure it'll focus at some point. Anyways, so Miles is like, isn't it glorious? And so they hear footsteps, like, coming up the stairs, and so Miles closes the door. And so Reginald sees that the closet, they were in the closet, but they just closed it, and so he didn't really get to see anything. And so then they did all the photography and everything. And so then they were like, Reginald gets the 2 paintings that he bought, and Charlie's like, you guys go ahead, I'm gonna hold back for a couple minutes. I gotta ask him something. I'm like, okay. And so Charlie is very interested, because Miles mentions, and the article mentions, that he gets these visions, and that's how he draws all these things, is from these visions that he receives. And so he's like, when did these visions start? A couple of years ago. He's like, how do you get these visions? Tell me everything you know about these. And so Miles, who is, again, insane, is like, well, I could show you the masterpiece again, and I'll tell you everything about him. I'll tell you everything about it. He's like, all right, show me it again. And so he opens up the closet again, pulls out the painting. He's like, here, just look into it. And so he looks into it again. He resists the temptation again, but he continues to look at it. As Miles continues talking, he's like, see this is the age of the serpent people. This is their altar. Do you see their altar? See it? And so he continues looking at the painting, and this time he does not resist. And he finds himself standing next to that stone altar. And he hears a dinosaur roar in the distance. And he is no longer in the 2-story building in Soho. He is in the Mesozoic era. And so he took a sanity loss of about 8. And so he went temporarily insane. He just started babbling and yelling incoherently and he now, well, he's there. Like, it's not an illusion. He's there. And so as the rest of the group is walking out, Gulk suddenly turns to Reginald. He's like, your friend is in danger. You gotta go back. Go back now. And so they run back up there, and all they see is just the open closet, and they see Miles just kind of next to the painting. And so they're like, what did you do with our friend? Like, he left. He's not here. Leave me alone. And so they don't buy it. And so he like closes the door. He closes the closet door. He's like, just leave. He's not here. And so Mifune is like, fuck that. So he starts charging over there. He's gonna open the door. And so Miles like throws a punch, but he misses. And Mifune yanks open the door. He sees the painting. And he sees Charlie standing next to the altar in the painting. Like, it's distinctly Charlie based on what he was just wearing and all that. His distinct American style. And so I think at one point Reginald pulls out his revolver, which he doesn't really want to do, but he does. And he hears footsteps coming up the stairs, and eventually up comes the old woman. And she's like, they're like, what did you do to Charlie? Why is he in the painting? How do we get him out? Miles, tell us how we get him out. And he just looks downwards as the woman talks. And she's like, oh, there's only one way to get him out. Like, what? Someone has to take his place. Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. I don't know if anybody's that valorous to try, because she could be just bullshitting you. And so they're like, I think Mifune is like, well, Miles, every artist should be a part of their work. And Reginald's like, yes. Because they want to put Miles in there. And the woman is like, oh, I must protest that. Miles will stay here. I think you two should leave and forget about your friend. And so, I think it's at this point, one of these points, that Reginald like cocks his gun, and he finds suddenly there's a needle at his throat from the old woman, and he was unclear as to how far away he was from the woman. He called bullshit. It could be bullshit, or it could be that she was really fast and just zoomed up on him before he realized, because perhaps she's not just an old woman. They didn't really jump to this conclusion yet. And so he's like, all right, perhaps we should leave. And so Mifune is like, all right. And so he starts leaving. He's like, Miles, your pictures aren't that good anyways. And so Miles clocks him. Just bam! 5 damage across the face. Knock that Negro down. And he's like, ugh. And so he eventually gets back up, and they both leave. Gulk does nothing during this whole thing, by the way. I should mention. Gulk, like, pretty much, because Reginald had a real conflicting moment where Miles was in front of him, like, threatening his friend. He hears footsteps behind him, and he's like, what do I do? And so Gulk was pretty much just kind of sitting there, kind of watching Reginald. Like, just real curious about what he was going to do. He's like, do something, Reginald! Like, it amused him. And so they all leave. They leave Charlie to his fate. And, okay. So Charlie is in this painting. He's not in the painting. He's in the Mesozoic era. And so the water starts to ripple, and out of the water come 5 serpent people, like walking lizards. And so he like backs up to the altar, and he starts shouting all these different Cthulhu mythos names. He names drop Nodens, Azathoth, Nyarlathotep, Niambe. He says everything he can to help him, because why not? And they close in on him, and then they stop. And a lightning bolt comes down right in front of Charlie and like blinds him for a moment. And as he looks back, he sees a man standing there where the lightning bolt hit. A man dressed in very expensive Egyptian regalia. And so the serpent people, like, their eyes grow wide, and they, as quickly as they can, begin to turn and scurry back into the water. But he just waves his hand, and they basically just disintegrate in front of him. And so then he turns, and he looks like a pharaoh. And he says, "Charles CoC, I am the Black Pharaoh. You are currently in an ancient time." And Charlie's like, "How ancient?" And I said 70 million years. That is not the Mesozoic area. It's probably 60 million years is what I should have said. I didn't have a reference, so I made it up. I was a little off. So 60 million years. It's like, fuck, man. And he says that Black Pharaoh's like, I don't believe it is your destiny to die here. I can save your life, Charles CoC, but you must give me something in return. He's like, what? And so I'm like, what does Charlie CoC treasure the most? And so they all discussed it, they were talking about it, and we settled very quickly on the thing that Charlie CoC treasures the most is how good he looks. No matter what he's doing, he's going to look good doing it. I was like, nice. And so the Black Pharaoh was like, And he waved his hand, and Charlie found himself suddenly, like, he blinked, and he was in his room that he stayed in at Alfred's mansion. Boom. And he was like, what just happened? What? And so he goes, takes a piss, and he like washes his face. He's like, ugh. And he looks up in the mirror. And I'm like, yeah, your appearance stat is now a 4. Basically, a 4 appearance means you look like the Elephant Man. Like, not enlarged or anything, but as grotesque as that is. It didn't affect his voice, he just looked terrible. Like, a 1 appearance means that anybody that sees you vomits on sight. So it's not that bad, but he took a heavy toll considering that's what Charlie loved, and his appearance was a 13. So that's a 9-point drop, which is real serious shit. Now, some characters, if you said, your appearance is now 4, I'd be like, I don't give a shit, whatever. No, but that's the point, is that he did care. And so his player, Alex Johnson, whatever, he really contemplated, suicide, like, for killing his character, because he didn't want to play somebody that ugly. And I was like, that's perfect, because only him would do that. Everybody else would be like, ugh, shit, at least I'm alive. But no, the Black Pharaoh knew. This is a much better fate. Okay. And so he basically just cried for a few hours and then drank for the rest of the night and just, oh God, contemplating suicide. And, yeah, so that was interesting. And so they eventually get a call from Charlie CoC, and he's like insane. He did the insanity thing very well. They're like, hello, who is this? Charlie CoC, private investigator. And they're like, they said you were sucked into a paint. What happened? Charlie CoC, private investigator. So he was clearly not right of mind. Oh, he also developed ophidiophobia, which I told him later because I didn't. When he went into the painting, I didn't think he was going to get out. I quickly developed this, and like, do I really want to kill off Charlie CoC? No, I can think of something better for Charlie CoC. And so I was later like, oh yes, you developed ophidiophobia, which is fear of snakes, which I feel is pretty appropriate if your mind realizes that perhaps someday these snakes could turn into people and they'd be snake people and they devour me. That's terrifying. And so now he has a fear of all snakes, and I will hopefully be able to work on that at some point. All right, and so they're like, we're going to send somebody to pick you up. And so they send Stefan and Golk back to the Alfred's mansion to pick him up, bring him back. While that's going on, Mafume develops all the pictures that he took. So they actually go to the scoop, they talk to Mickey, and they get the photos developed in their dark room. And so that's all settled. And so now they're kind of afraid, because they definitely pissed these people off. These two insane people, know their names. They know the names Reginald Steinway and Charlie Chalk. And they're worried they're going to be hunted down. And so they're like, we may need to deal with this. And so Von Lyons steps up, because of course he's a murderer. And he's like, I have some history with getting rid of people. And so thus starts this plan of dealing with these two people. And what's interesting is Von Lyons apparently only murders people that are connected with a cult. Never once did I mention or say anything suggesting that these two were involved with a cult. Now, there is the painting that had some people that had the headdresses of the cult. But he had paintings of a lot of shit, and he claimed he got visions. And I'll tell you right now, they weren't connected with any cult. Ever. There's no way for them to know that now, but yeah, they were never connected with any cult. So I don't know how Von Lyons would feel about that information. He probably wouldn't care because it's Ed, but do with that what you will. Some people are not involved with the cults. Alright. And so Charlie arrives there. He's not very... He slowly sobers up during the conversation. When he gets there, he's still kind of insane. He's just, I'm going to kill that Black Pharaoh. He's got a target on his head, man. He's done. I'm going to get him. I'm going to kill those two other motherfuckers. I don't give a shit. He's just swearing up a storm. He's talking about murdering everybody. He's like, I don't give a shit. And as the conversation went on, he became more his traditional Charlie Chalk. He's like, I'm mad, but I'm not crazy. So I think we need to deal with this in an irrational manner. I was like, okay. And so the plan became... rather than just kill them, shoot them in the head, why don't we start their house on fire? And so it's a brick house, and so you're going to have to start the fire from inside. And so Von Lyons' idea was to pour gasoline into the letter opener, or letter slot, that's it, letter slot, and pour it in there, light the match, and let it burn. It was kind of a shady plan, because Reginald said that the woman was like a witch. He has no real proof of this, but he has his suspicions, and he's probably right. Something was not right about her, at least. She didn't seem like a normal grandma. And so they're like, okay, so this woman's probably, not right. He's not right. This plan may not go so well, but I guess it's our best bet. There was also plans of driving a vehicle full of gasoline into the house, but they squashed that. Okay, so the team was Von Lyons, Charlie Chalk, Mafume, and Golk. They were going to drive down... No, they didn't drive down there. They, walked down there. They were just going to light the gasoline, and get out of there. Set it on fire. Okay, so they walk down there. They get down there. They scope out the neighborhood. The two houses on either side are pretty much deserted. Nobody's in there. No lights are on anywhere. It's like 1 a.m.-ish. And they see that the backyard is fenced in. Like, pretty high fence. You can't see into the backyard. And so Charlie eventually climbs over the fence with some help, checks the back door, finds it is locked. He's like, Von Lyons, you know how to pick locks? And I think that was where I had an out-of-game conversation where he's like, I thought this was what you did. How do you not know how to pick locks? I thought you were like an assassin. He's like, no, I just kill these people because they killed my wife and kid. He has not really many skills applicable to this. And he's like, this is a hell of a time to find this out. Because he thought this whole time that Von Lyons was his master assassin. Nope, not this time. And so CoC's like, I can pick locks. It's like, CoC, why didn't you tell me? He's like, I didn't want to steal anybody's spotlight. And so he climbs back over the fence. And they're like, all right, pick the lock to the front door. And so CoC goes up to the front door. He hunches down. And he's kind of like this. Like, they can't see anything that he's doing with his fingers. But he's kind of like fidgeting around. And then eventually he's just... And the door opens. And so they go in. Mifune stays outside as watch. And they bust out the gasoline and they just start spreading it around. And they both make their sneak rolls, by the way. I think actually this was where that conversation came up. Because he's like, what's your sneak? And he's like, I don't know, 20? It's like, what? He made his sneak roll amazingly. I was really impressed. And so they coat the whole place in gasoline. And I have Mifune make, I think, 2 spot hidden rolls. He fails both. Good scout, right? The guy with like the lowest spot hidden. And so eventually, like 25 feet away from me, he finally notices. He's like, whoa! He sees Miles Shipley and basically a prostitute walking towards the house. He's like, oh shit! So he whips out... Oh man. I mean, I was going to remember it eventually because this was a key moment. But I forgot about it before. After we came back from dinner, Mifune and CoC were sitting in the vehicle outside the Shipley house. And so, again, this is their height of CoC's suspicions. They don't trust him at all. And he's like, man, it sure is boring in here. Hey, George, you want to see a magic trick? And he's like, no. Because normal CoC saying that scares you. This version of CoC, that just terrifies you. So he's like, I don't know. It's like, oh, it'll be fun, don't worry. And so he's like, all right. And so CoC starts reaching his hand toward his head. And he like swats into. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, it won't hurt you, just trust me. Okay. And so CoC reaches in, he goes past his head, and suddenly he whips back and there's a coin in his hand. And they're like, ah! Scare him. He's like, haha, wasn't that funny? Here, you can have the coin. And so he looks at the coin, it's completely blank. Like, just, there's nothing. There's no symbols, there's no grooves, there's nothing. It's like just a piece of metal. Perfectly circular. He's like, can I tell what metal this is? And I'm like, well, you're not a metallurgist. And so he rolls his metallurgy skill, of which, default has 1%. He rolls an 8. I was really impressed. But not quite cutting it. Because, how can you really tell what any metal is just by look? I mean, you can tell the difference between copper and steel, I guess, but specifics? And I was like, no, you can't tell, but that kind of also scares you. He's like, CoC, where did you get this? He's like, oh, I pick up things here and there. Okay, so, the coin, yes. Why I brought that up. So back to Mifune turning around after seeing Miles coming towards. He whips out the coin and he flicks it down the hallway into the house to get their attention. And I'm like, oh my god. It's like slow motion, you guys, as you watch this coin sail through the air and bounce against the wooden floor. Just... And then as it finally comes to a rest and it just spins around and rattles against the floor for what seems like an eternity, echoing throughout the home. And they're just like, we run out of the house. And so they light the gasoline on their way out. They slam the door shut, and they like bar it shut as the fire rages inside the house. And the prostitute runs off. Like, she's terrified. Miles busts out a big butcher's knife that he carries around with him. And he like lunges at Mifune. He did not hit Mifune once. Mifune was like dark as night, man. He was just like... Psh, psh, psh. I think Charlie Chalk said he was like smooth criminal. So, yeah, basically just pictured that. And so, I think Mifune hits him once. I think Von Lyons shoots him. He shoots a couple times. I feel like he hit the second time. I don't think enough to kill him, though. But right after he shoots him, they all roll dodge, and Charlie succeeds. The other fail. And basically the front wall of the house like explodes outwards. And so Von Lyons and Mifune are hit for 5 damage from flying rubble that just like smashes against them. They all hit the deck. Everybody. Miles looks like he's just down, like he's done. And Charlie somehow manages to dodge. Golk is on the ground, but he looks like he might be faking it. He doesn't really look injured. And so they turn back to the house, and they see standing there with clothes on fire is a serpent person. So sanity losses all around, even from Charlie, because I didn't make him do sanity loss before because I wasn't planning on him surviving. So now there's a sanity loss. And so yeah, they see this serpent person who's wearing the clothes of the old woman that are like burning now. And so obviously this old woman was a serpent person in disguise. And so he shrugs off the burning clothes and he like begins to cast another spell in serpent language, you know. And so I think it was Charlie. I'm almost certain. Yeah, it was Charlie. He's just like, enough of this shit. So he pulls out his revolver and just... Alfred gave him a revolver. I didn't mention that, but Alfred did give him a revolver, which is not legal for him to have. Not legal for Charlie to have, but who cares? So Charlie's just... And the bullet soars through the air and just... He rolled a 2. So he got to do... I was trying to look up the impale rules real quick. I couldn't find it, so I was just like, screw it, just do double damage. The actual rule for impaling, critting, is you roll damage twice. But it was fine. So he did like 18 damage. And Serpent Person is tougher than a human, but not that tough. So... And the fire raged inwards against the house. They walked over. He put another bullet into the serpent person. They put a bullet in Miles. They hear sirens in the distance, so they just book it. And as they're running away, as they get away, they're like, "Shit, you didn't get a picture of the serpent person? Damn it, Mifune!" Would have been the crowning achievement. And so they like dive in a dumpster and they pretend they're homeless for some reason, and then they run to the safe house. So they spend the night at the safe house. Von Lyons really didn't want to show Golk where the safe house is. I'm not sure why, but okay. So they eventually relented, mostly because of Charlie Chalk insisting. Like, he's earned his due, man. He's a good guy. Just let it be, man. So they all go to the safe house. At the safe house, again, I have no specifics on this. All he said was, it's in the heart of London. It's very secure. You can't get in. And so I guess, like, each compartment can be bolted off. And so when Von Lyons and they all get in, then they all go to sleep. Von Lyons locks them all in their rooms. There's no way out. Like, what the hell is that shit? What a great place. And so they all go to sleep. What a night. Yeah. So February 7th, 1925, Saturday, that was pretty much a rest day for everybody. Nobody was really pushing anything. Just kind of ease back. Let these things handle. Oh, during the night, like once they got to the safe house. I'm sorry, I didn't write this down. I write so much down, but not everything. Charlie called Mickey Mahoney. Like, he looked up his home phone number, called him up in the middle of the night. It was like 2 or 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. It's like, Mickey, it's Charlie Chalk. You got to get down to that crazy artist place. There's like a lizard man. It's crazy. Get down there. And he's like, what? So he just drops the phone. He runs down. He drives down there. And so in the morning, Charlie's so excited. He runs and he gets a copy of The Scoop, brand new edition. And in there, he sees an article about Lizard Man in New York. And so the article was written by Mickey himself about how there was a dead lizard man found in Soho and stuff. How very exciting. And so anyways, yeah, February 7th, mostly rest day, but Charlie really trusted Golk. He's really trusting Golk at this point. He thinks he can be real useful. And so he remembered that Golk said he could read French. And they have a book from the Carlisle thing, the Erica Carlisle, that's in French. They can't read it. They're like, Golk, maybe you could like read this book for us and like sum it up for us. Tell us some information about it because we can't read French. He's like, I gotta warn you though, like these books that we've been reading have really like affected us, you know. And so I'm not gonna pressure you into doing this, but it would help us out. And so Golk's just like, yeah, sure, I'll read it. And so they go out to Alfred's place to pick up the book, because that's where it was. And so Golk starts reading it. And that was pretty much February 7th. Not very exciting. February 8th, 1925, which is a Sunday, Golk goes up to Charlie in the morning. He's like, hey Charlie, I finished reading that book. What? Already? Holy shit, man. Well, tell me about. Give me the abridged version. What's it about? And so Golk's like, well, it was really crazy. It was based on this other book called the Book of Iban, and so it talked all about this ancient sorcerer named Iban who knew all this stuff. And it talked about like serpent people, like that guy that we saw, and it talked about some real powerful entities. One was called Nodens, the Mighty Hunter, or something. And it even talked about like this ritual that would let you contact Nodens. That could be cool. And it also talked about this other powerful entity called the God of 1,000 Masks. So I don't know. I guess if you want more details, I can tell you, but it was crazy. And so Charlie, of course, was very interested in this information about Nodens because he had spoken to Nodens. Or at least he had a vision of himself speaking to Nodens. Or a guy that said he was Nodens. Either way. And so there's now this ritual that they could potentially cast, you know, to contact what is essentially a god. And Golk knows it. Wow. That's big stuff. And so Charlie's like, I gotta get everybody together. We gotta discuss this. And so they all meet up at the Steinway offices. And so Charlie relays this information. And, you know, he discusses that he had a vision of Nodens. And Nodens appears to be, you know, somebody that, you know, may help us. You know, he definitely didn't hurt us. And so During this time, during the latter half of this session, Alfred was basically bowing out. Like, he was basically transferring over to a new character. I guess his time with Alfred was done. He wanted somebody a bit more exciting. I don't know, for whatever his reasons, he was transferring over. And so none of them could get in contact with Alfred's character because he was just missing, more or less. He was talking, he was conversing with whoever his new character was. And so they were like, our main priority is to find out what's going on with Alfred, get in touch with him, but we also got to, we wrapped up this first lead, but it didn't really provide us with much information, so I guess we got to keep on looking at these other ones. And so they discussed their other leads, and the next one that they planned was the Lesser Adale, the monster slaughters or whatever out in the village. And so they're like, okay, you can probably settle on that one. That seems all right. We can plan a trip out there. And during this whole conversation, Golk's like, hey, we could contact Nodens about what to do. We could contact Nodens about where Alfred is. And none of them were very keen on this contact Nodens idea. Even Charlie was like, maybe we should only do this when we really need his help. And Golk's like, no. He really wants to cast a ritual. And so Reginald then spoke up about wanting to go to the Penhew Foundation, because he mentioned that before. I think we should go to the Penhew Foundation, show him show somebody there these pictures that Mifune took. Maybe we can get some information also about Aubrey, Penhew, the expedition. And so Golk's like, oh, I'll go with. And so, yeah, that's pretty much where we ended. We did not introduce Ren's new character, although he appears to be some sort of Catholic priest or something like that. Definitely involved with the church. He's called a father. And so, yeah, we'll introduce him next time. So I guess that's the end of Alfred, which is kind of a bummer. He was a cool guy. But, yeah, people like to switch characters. Yeah, he survived. So there you go. He's been retired and he survived. What other characters have we had that did that? The baseball player. Walter Pratt. Walter Pratt is still alive. I guess the serial killer might still be... The banker serial killer might still be alive. Hard to say. He might get shanked in prison. Who knows? Walter Pratt, definitely. So anyways, that's about that. So... we'll see what they do next time. Next week, next Sunday is Mother's Day. We are planning on having a session unless a few members say that they can't make it. Ziggy has already stated he can't make it next time, so he will not be going to the Penhew Foundation next session. So, I don't know. We're going to see what happens. I won't run a session with, just 3 investigators. No, I wouldn't. That's just, I feel like this is really kind of a cooperative thing that they all got going on together, so I don't want to skip out on too many people. But, yeah, so they still have plenty of leads, plenty of stuff to do in London. They have Golk with them, they're still making up their minds on. During the conversation, right. He had mentioned the Penhew Foundation and stuff like that, and Golk was like, and we could ask them about that Black Pharaoh figure. And Reginald's like, yes, you're right. And so then they were like, Charlie was like, how do you know about the Black Pharaoh? And Golk's like, well, rumors, and you mentioned them. You were babbling about him. He's like, oh, okay. And then Von Lyons was like, to Reginald, he was like, how do you know about the Black Pharaoh? There's this big... And Reginald's like... Golk's like, yeah! And Reginald says that he had read a book given from Erica Carlisle detailing, this figure in Egyptian history and stuff like that. And so Golk's like, oh, you read Life as a God, huh? And then everybody was like, That was a little bit over the line, Gulk. And so Reginald's like, where did you get your copy? Gulk's like, oh, I read my copy in Australia. Like, well, you are a world traveler. But I could tell all their trust levels, even Charlie Chalks went down just a little bit from that line, that he just knew about life as a god. They don't know what to make of him. And I am sure to tell you all about it in Secrets of Role Mangging. But, yeah. So I think that just about wraps up that session. It was definitely better than the previous one. They definitely got some action. People died. Things happened. It was cool. But there is still plenty more to go in London. You know, they still got plenty of leads, and leads they don't even know about yet. So we will see what happens with them. The assault on the Shipley house definitely could have gone a lot worse. Charlie with that lucky headshot, that definitely saved them a lot of trouble because they were about to get owned. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this video. So, of course, definitely check out the Secrets of Role Mangging video coming tomorrow for all the juicy background information about what's going on with Gulk and Nodens and blah, 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 blah. But other than that, my name is Mang. This has been Role Mangging, and I'll see you fine folks next week.